All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. We are talking about the Detroit Lions in today's video. So wide receiver is going on Netflix, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the featured dudes. And uh, the amount of injuries he dealt with last season that nobody really knew about was pretty crazy. And the fact that he just put up the season he did, 119 catches, over 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns, first team All Pro honors. It's just crazy how good this dude is. And one of my big issues, or sorry, one of my bigger concerns for the Detroit Lions heading into the offseason, before free agency hit, before the draft hit, was the wide receiver room. Just because I'm thinking, God forbid, what happens if Amon's down for a couple of weeks, a couple of games, in a pivotal stretch? Like, what can Detroit do to, prevent that from being a big issue, right? And the more the offseason went in, and the more you look into Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs and guys like DPJ from last season, Khalif Raymond, I don't view the Lions wide receiver room as an issue at all. But just because of Amon-Ra St. Brown being on TV, I thought it was fitting to do a 2024 Detroit Lions training camp preview that I got from PradaDetroit.com from my favorite Detroit Lions writer, Jeremy Reisman. And he was just kind of, going through all the basics with the Detroit Lions wide receiver room. So let's talk about it. But before we do, if you guys enjoy it, be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. There's only a bunch of Lions videos. You guys keep blessing it. I appreciate and love you guys so much. Seriously, we are just so close to training camp and preseason. It's going to be a great year covering the Detroit Lions. And thank you guys for keeping me afloat this summer. But if we could try and get this video to 250 likes, I would really appreciate it. Amon-Ra St. Brown's established himself as a star wide receiver, and Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions offensive production the last two seasons has been top 5 back-to-back years. And it would not shock me in the slightest if the Detroit Lions had the best offense in the NFL this season. But with this offensive line, with Ben Johnson, with Jared Goff being so underrated in general, it's at worst, once again, in my opinion, a top 5 offense. But the wide receiver room is really interesting because outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's uncertainty, right? And in the offseason, they wanted to re-sign Josh Reynolds, and they made it loud and freaking clear. But unfortunately, he decided to go to the Denver Broncos. Detroit didn't necessarily make a move to replace him. They re-signed Donovan Peoples-Jones to a vet minimum deal. They re-signed a couple of guys on futures deals. Obviously, you gave Amon-Ra St. Brown a massive contract extension. But the thought is Jameson Williams is going to be wide receiver too. So they've expressed this all offseason. Jameson Williams, former first-round pick from a couple of seasons ago. As the season went on, because he was dealing with the suspension, we did see Jameson Williams have a beautiful catch in his rookie season. And then last year, we saw a little bit more consistency, but more so at the end of the year. So the thought process is he's entering year 2. I mean, he should be wide receiver number 2, or did I say year 2, wide receiver 2? Year 3, wide receiver number 2. And he got so much hype and so much praise in the middle of the offseason because we heard this quote from Dan Campbell in the spring. We're 2 practices in to OTAs, and if you said, give me one player that is the most improved from the start to finish in that time, Jamo would be that guy. He's a man on a mission, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So Jameson last season started 12 of the Lions' final 14 games of the season. He averaged 17.8 receiving yards per game in his first 5 contests back from suspension. But then Williams averaged 34.4 receiving yards per game over the final 10. So it was really inconsistent when he came back, but the final end of the season was, I know 35 receiving yards per game doesn't really move the needle, but just for some reference, Josh Reynolds, who they lost, he averaged 34.2 and 35.8 yards per game with the Lions in the last 2 seasons. So the wide receiver room was fine last year. In fact, like the last 2 seasons, it's actually been a huge strength. So now the question becomes, if Jameson Williams is poised for a big breakout year, entering year 3, he's going to be the Lions wide receiver number 2. Once again, you still got Sam Laporta, you still got Jahmyr Gibbs, definitely still showing love to those guys. So it's not just the wide receiver room, but the big question is who's going to be wide receiver number 3. I look at it and I'm thinking to myself, Khalif Raymond, but apparently Antoine Green is going to be the dude, or was appearing like that at the end of minicamp and OTAs and all that fun stuff. So this was the excerpt I got from prideandstrike.com from Jeremy. Going into camp, there seems to be 3 clear competitors for a starting role alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. DPJ, second-year receiver Antoine Green, and veteran Khalif Raymond. Green appears to be the favorite heading into camp since he repped with the starters more than anyone during OTAs this spring. So you drafted him in the 7th round in 2023. He only had 106 snaps in his rookie season, and he only caught 1 pass. But apparently, they were impressed by him. Antoine Green's a guy I vividly remember making videos on this time last season, thinking he could be a secret weapon on the Lions. But once again, unfortunately, it was a loaded wide receiver room, sneaky loaded wide receiver room, and he only saw 106 snaps. But Antoine Green really caught my eye in college at his final season at North Carolina because, first off, he was in college for 5 years. He was at North Carolina for 5 years. But in his final 5th year, 43 catches in only 9 games. Keep in mind, this is only 9 football games. 43 catches for 798 yards and 7 touchdowns. But what's the craziest part is he averaged 19 yards per reception. So this dude's got speed. He's got the size. I mean, he's got literally everything. And you drafted him in the 7th round. So hearing Antoine Green is kind of penciled in as wide receiver 3 is music to my ears. But even if he's not ready for the task, you still have DPJ and you still have Khalif Raymond. Now, you re-sign Donovan Peoples-Jones. This is important because the statistics are not eye-popping in any way, shape, or form. But if you're a Lions fan watching this video, DPJ did have some pretty big critical catches. So they felt comfortable re-signing him, which makes me feel comfortable that they re-signed him. And then finally, if Khalif Raymond, who was my penciled-in wide receiver 3, and it's just keep in mind, he's been with Detroit for so long now. He's got just a great chemistry with Jared Goff. But he was a starter for Detroit back in 2021, and he had 576 yards and 4 touchdowns. So that would be like, if your wide receiver 3 is giving you 600 receiving yards, like, I'm going to freaking take that. Once again, we're going to throw in Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I was concerned with the Detroit Lions wide receiver room. And then, I mean, this was like a long time ago. This was like February. And especially when they lost Josh Reynolds. But my point is, it's a good wide receiver room. And if Jameson Williams can take the leap like we think he can, like if he produces any output of production that he did in his final year of college, if any of that translates to this season, the Detroit Lions will clearly be one of the best offenses in the NFL. And this doesn't even factor in the run game, Ben Johnson, the offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of a random video because, once again, we got training camp in like 2 weeks, so we're just kind of desperate at this point. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hit that like button, hit that sub button, go check out that article, and let me know what are your thoughts on the wide receiver room for the Detroit Lions. Peace.